Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch review, and today we're comparing three sizes of the Royal Oak, which is a 37mm, the 39mm and a 41mm. As with all my reviews, let's go back in time and look at where the Royal Oak came from. I'm just going to do a very basic history of the Royal Oak. So the Royal Oak was released back in 1972 as a direct response to the drop in sales in the Swiss watch industry due to quartz watches, so the quartz boom. Really that saw a lot of brands going out of business. Audemars Piguet was very close to going out of business, so they had to create something special and unique to take the market by storm. And they knew it had to be something totally different to what was already out there. They ended up creating the Royal Oak, or Gento was the one that designed the Royal Oak, a watch designer, and he designed the Royal Oak basically to be your ultimate watch that you could wear for any occasion. It was also a watch that was in steel initially, and the watch was finished to an incredible level. Not just like a normal sports watch, this Royal Oak was actually finished to the same level as a dress watch. And the fact it was in steel made it even more difficult to do that, even more expensive and even more skilled to be able to create a watch with that level of finishing and attention to detail in steel. So that really added value to the watch and made it extremely expensive in fact, but also quite rare. And that is what people really fell in love with, the fact that this was just an incredibly crafted piece, and actually a piece of art. And people realized that the quartz watches back then were not art. They were just much more about function. So yeah, that brought Audemars Piguet back onto the map again. Their sales were doing very well. The Royal Oak was a great success a couple of years after it was first released, and it has remained the most important part of the Audemars Piguet line. It is completely Audemars Piguet's DNA now. People associate Audemars Piguet with the Royal Oak. And now moving on 40 years to the 40th anniversary of the Royal Oak in 2012, we saw the release of actually all three of these watches that we're looking at here today. Before these, so pre these watches that we're looking at, there was the extra thin and also a 39mm Royal Oak, which was the reference 15300. That was then replaced in 2012 to mark the anniversary of the watch. And also the extra thin back then was replaced by this 15202, which is the 39mm watch that we're looking at here today. And then the 39mm standard 15300 reference was replaced by two watches. One was a 15400 reference, which is what we're looking at also, which is a 41mm, and that was Audemars Piguet's response to the new trends of bigger watches. Basically, they sized up the original Royal Oak for people with bigger wrists and to go with the new trends. And then they also released a 37mm, the 15450 reference, also that we're looking at here today, and that one was designed for people with smaller wrists. Okay, so that concludes the basic history on these watches. If you want to learn more about the Royal Oak and the history of the Royal Oak, the past models of the watch, how it was designed, the design inspiration, just a much more in-depth history of this watch, then go check out my Royal Oak extra thin review, the 15202 review. That will give you much more in-depth information on the Royal Oak. Okay, so the features on these watches, they are all steel Royal Oaks, so they are very similar in terms of their design. But the finer details on the watches do change a little bit. They are actually quite different watches when you look close up. So we'll start with the clasp on all of the watches. They all feature the same clasp, the incredible double deployment clasp. Probably the best clasp in the industry in my opinion. It's absolutely brilliant. It's beautifully machined to such a high level as well. All three of them feature a twin trigger deployment clasp. And so it means it's very solid on your wrist. It's not really going to go anywhere. It's very difficult for it just to ping off on its own. My favorite thing about this clasp is the fact that it's completely seamless with the design of the bracelet. The bracelet is absolutely stunning on this watch. And so Audemars Piguet obviously didn't want to break up that beautiful design. They wanted to make it completely seamless with the whole, and harmonious with the whole design of the watch. And they've definitely succeeded there. Moving now onto the bracelets, and we'll just look at the 15202, so the extra thin here, while we're comparing bracelets. The bracelet on these Audemars Piguets is absolutely stunning. It's probably, in fact, I would say definitely the best bracelet in the industry. Is absolutely stunning, and to think they've crafted it out of steel is amazing. The finishing on this bracelet is incredible. The attention to detail is stunning. The polished and brushed edges, amazing. It's just, yeah, it's a pure work of art, and really this was the main selling point of the Royal Oak when it was released back in 1972. That's what made it so iconic and unique. was the design that Gerald Genta made. So the bracelet features lots of flat, smaller links and then little plots between each links. Because they're all individual links and completely flat, it shimmers the light off in such an incredible fashion. It looks almost like a diamond the way it scintillates and sparkles, same way that the facets on a diamond scintillate and sparkle. Yeah, it's truly special. No other bracelet industry creates that finish and that shimmer and effect. So it's a very special bracelet. All of them feature a little taper towards the clasp at the bottom from the case to the clasp. The biggest taper is probably on the 15202 ST, so the 39mm watch in this example that we're looking at, the extra thin. And I'd say probably the least tapered bracelet is the 15400, the 41mm watch that we're looking at. That's got a pretty wide bracelet all the way from the case right down to underneath your wrist on the clasp. So yeah, it depends on what you prefer in terms of tapering. I personally prefer the extra thin, the 39mm watch in this example. I much prefer the thinner taper. I think it looks a little bit more elegant and slightly less sporty, even though a sports watch is meant to be a little bit more chunky. The depth of the bracelet is also different on all of these watches. The thinnest depth to all the links is by far on the extra thin, which is the 39mm watch, the 15202. The next thickest bracelet or links is on the 15450, the 37mm watch. And then the thickest is the 15400, the 41mm watch, and that features pretty thick. I'd say maybe 2 to 1.5 times the thickness of the extra thin bracelet. So much bigger, much heavier as a result. Feels much more weighted, much more solid, much more of a utility sports watch versus the 202. The 39mm is much lighter than this 15400 reference, and also I'd probably say a little bit lighter also than the 15450, the 37mm. Moving now up onto the case. The case on all these watches is very different. Of course, the main thing you're going to notice about the cases on all three of these is they are different sizes, which is the subject of this video, which is the 37mm we're looking at is of course 37mm. The next one is 39mm, which is the extra thin, the 15202, which is in the middle here. And then we've got the 15400 ST on the end, and that is a 41mm case size. The case size is pretty apparent when you put them all together in a line. The difference between them is not major, but it's definitely there. The difference becomes more obvious when you place the 15400 and the 37mm. So the 41mm versus the 37mm, when you place those two together, it becomes a little bit more obvious. I'll just quickly go through the features of the case. All of them feature an incredible exhibition case back, so a clear crystal case back. The best one, by far in my opinion, is the 15202, the extra thin case back, because it features a much larger crystal, a much larger window to look inside the movement. The movement is also obviously a different movement in versus the other two watches here. This one is of course the special extra thin movement developed in 1972, and this is the exact same movement from the original Royal Oak from back then. So this is a very special movement, and of course needs to be shown in all its glory. The other two watches feature a beautiful movement as well, wonderfully finished with an incredible 22 karat rotor, 22 karat gold that is, and that features the Audemars and Piguet family crests engraved on the actual rotor. Really nice attention to detail on this movement. It's finished to an incredible level, absolutely stunning. The same level of attention to detail and craftsmanship that we see on the rest of the watch is carried over onto the movement, which is an amazing thing obviously because only really the wearer is the one that's going to be able to appreciate that. Okay, so moving up onto the rest of the case, and we're just going to turn them all on the side now so you can see kind of the depth of each watch, and you'll see that the extra thin is actually 8.1mm thick. And then next we've got the 37mm, which is 9.8mm thick, and then lastly we've got the 41mm, which is 9.8mm thick also. I'm just going to pull the 37mm and the 41mm side by side now. Even though it's the same depth, because the case size is so much smaller than the 41mm, especially from this angle you can see that. The whole dimensions of the watch and the way the watch wears is much deeper because of that. Okay, so coming back on the 15202 to explain the rest of the case, we've got a beautiful brushed finish case all over. We've got these really nice accents at 3 o'clock on the opposite side of the crown, these kind of bold line marks, which are really nice on the side of the watch. Moving up, we have full brushed finish. We've got our bezel, which has a polished edge, and then a full brushed finish on the top. We've got 8 hexagonal screws made from 18 karat white gold Really nice touch there. If you watch my 15202 review, you'll understand why they've made them from 18 karat gold, so go and check that out. All of them feature a very similar dial. The 15400, so the 41mm and the 37mm feature an almost identical dial, just scaled down for the 37mm. The 39mm, which is the extra thin, features quite a different dial to the other two. It doesn't feature a seconds hand. It also features a petite tapisserie dial versus the mega tapisserie effect that we see on the 37mm and the 41mm. Which is going with the kind of newer style of watches that they create now, the kind of newer style dials. They also feature like a sunburst effect, slightly harder to show you on the silver dial or the white dial, a bit easier to show you on the 41mm with the blue dial. The dial, in my opinion, on the 37mm and the 41 has a little bit more life. It's a little bit more sparkly, a little bit more special, like jewelry. And in that respect, I do slightly prefer it in a way. But I love the classicness of the 39mm. Obviously, it's getting its design inspiration from the original Royal Oak, and it looks very, very, very similar to that original design. Okay, so now let's get them on the wrist so you can see them all side by side. We'll start with the 37mm. I'll just put that on my wrist now so you can see that. The 37mm is maybe a little bit small for me. I don't mind it. I do really like this size of watch. I'm glad they did bring out a smaller watch rather than just keeping it with the 41mm. We don't find this watch mega popular. We actually find it much more popular with women over men, even though it is a unisex watch. Yeah, we find this watch being worn more often by our female clients because it's just a nicer size for them. You know, of course, girls have started to look more towards bigger watches now, going with the general trend of watches. And this watch is slightly smaller than the standard watches they do tend to look at. So for example, most of the Rolexes that they wear, like a Daytona, is a 40mm watch, whereas this is 37, so it tends to look actually a little bit better, in my opinion, on a smaller wrist. You should be able to see on this watch that the depth is quite apparent, even though it is quite small. You kind of feel like there's much more distance between the top of the crystal, the glass, and all the way down to the dial. It definitely feels like there's more depth to this piece. It also does sit a little higher, even though it's the same depth as the 41mm. It feels like it sits higher on your wrist than the 41mm, purely because it's scaled down in terms of case diameter, but the depth is not scaled down. Moving now on to the 39mm. The 39mm wears absolutely beautifully on my wrist, in my opinion. This is the perfect size for me, probably maybe between the 37 and the 38. The 39 would be perfect, maybe around 38mm. But I do really like the size of this 39mm watch on myself. My wrist is 16.5 centimeters in circumference, if you wanted that for reference. Yeah, beautiful watch. It's obviously very thin compared to the other two watches, so it does wear very differently to them. The bracelet is also thinner as well, and tapers to a much thinner, finer point. One thing you will notice though is that the lugs splay out further, so the extremities, so north and south, the top and bottom of the watch, do splay out much more so on the extra thin versus the other watches. I'll try and show that on screen now. You can see that the 37mm tightens up to a much smaller circumference than we see on the 39mm. And then moving on now to the 41mm on my wrist. The 41mm wears much bigger than probably I'd like, at 16.5 centimeters, but we have clients that own this watch that have wrist size of around 15.5 centimeters. So you definitely shouldn't be scared away by the size of this watch. It looks great. Because the bracelet is slightly tapered, it doesn't appear too big. Yeah, it's definitely a much larger watch than the other two that we're looking at. In terms of dimensions, it has a similar feel to the 39mm in terms of dimensions, even though it is thicker. Because it is larger, it doesn't feel too deep at all when you compare the two of them. So it is a really nicely proportioned watch. Yeah, wears great, much more solid feel to the, compared to the other watches, especially the extra thin. This one feels a lot more solid and kind of stronger and a bit more of a utility sports watch. Definitely that hefty weight is more obvious and apparent than the 15202, which is much lighter. So overall, who should buy each watch? Well, that very much depends on your style and what watches you prefer. Do you prefer smaller watches or bigger watches? All of these watches will suit you. They look great on a massive range of wrists, especially the 39mm and actually the 41mm. I'd say maybe the 37mm, a lot of guys, it may look a little bit too small on compared to today's standard, but if you prefer more classic style, then the 37mm is a great watch. If you're a purist, then the only option for you will be the 15202 extra thin, because that is the truest to the original Royal Oak back from 1972. The others are obviously more modern variations of the Royal Oak. They have kind of different design cues and elements to them. I think they do look really nice, and I do prefer them in some ways. I feel like they have a little bit more life. Like I said, they look a little bit more special, especially the second hand makes them feel like the heart is beating a little bit. There's a little bit more going on in them as well. They just feel a bit more like jewellery on the dials in that respect. They definitely do feel more modern, but I do absolutely love the extra thin. There's something that's so special about that watch that you can't, or that you don't feel the same way from the other two watches here. The extra thin just has this sort of silence about it, this kind of historic feel. It's a very, very special watch, and it's very apparent when you put it on. So overall, which watch would I own? I probably would own the 39mm. I think it suits my wrist the best of all of them. I love the 37mm and I love the 41mm. I'm always surprised at how good the 41mm looks on my wrist, or even though it is a large watch. But yeah, personally I would prefer the 15202 ST if I was to choose between all of them. Probably the thing that I would note though is that the 39mm is really a different watch completely to the other two because of its extra thin movement and its design, and the fact it's original to the same design from back in 1972. They do have a higher retail price on that watch. It also is very much more in demand, and the supply is quite small on the watch. So it's quite a rare piece, and they sell considerably over retail price as well. All of these watches in fact sell for over retail price, but the 15202 sells the most over retail price. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more watch reviews, and as always, if you're interested in any of these watches, then don't hesitate to contact us. Our details are in the description. And also at the end of this video, we'd be happy to call any of these into stock for you.